Bottom line, if you want your tours to be more memorable, you need to get your guests participating and engaged. Full stop. Hey there, Kelsey Toner here, the founder of Guest Focused Tour Business Coaching, where every day we're helping you build a thriving, profitable tour and activity business. In this series, we're looking at how to design a tour guests will never forget. We're sharing practical tools and frameworks to create more memorable tours, and as always, sharing best practices from real-world tour and activity businesses from around the world. Today, we're looking at interactive tour design, how to get your guests involved, engaged, and excited, and move them away from passive observers to active participants. Think about the difference between watching someone make pasta and making it yourself, between hearing about a traditional dance or maybe getting to try out the steps, between looking at street art or creating your own street art. When guests actively participate in your tours and activities, memories form more deeply. Learning becomes more natural. Connections with one another grow stronger and experiences become personal. Scientific studies show that our brains are wired to remember more effectively what we do than just what we see or ultimately hear. I mean, think about your own experiences in education over the years. New neural pathways are required when you are engaging or participating in something. So, bottom line, if you want your tours to be more memorable, you need to get your guests participating and engaged. Full stop. This is also reinforced in the guest focus unforgettable product pyramid, where here, as we move up this pyramid through the levels, our tours and experiences become more memorable. So early on, when we're taking care of those foundational things like physiological elements, do we need to use the bathroom? Is it too hot? Is it too cold? Is the sun in our eyes? Do we feel safe and secure in our environment? Well, guess what? As we get to bonding, as we get to those social connections, it's essential that we have participation to help form those bonds, to go on that journey together or have a sense of shared challenge. All of this will bring your guest and guide or guests together. At the very top of this pyramid, the most memorable experiences out there. That type of transformation rarely takes place as a passive observer. Almost always, we're engaging and participating in the experience in a much deeper way to have that type of transformation. Okay, now let's explore 3 powerful types of interaction that you can layer onto your tour. We'll go through lots of examples to give you inspiration for what's possible when doing tour design. The first is hands-on activities. This is about creating and doing. Whether it's crafting, cooking, building something, hands-on activities give guests tangible achievements to remember. Now, hands-on experiences can be at the heart of your entire tour, like one of our coaches, Angela Shen, who created Savor the Wild here in the Pacific Northwest. Her chef-led intro to gourmet mushroom foraging and cooking is not just learning about mushrooms or how to identify them, but rather a hands-on harvesting, cleaning, and cooking experience that delights her guests. Incorporating food and drink into your tour activity or experience, even if it's not a food tour or a beverage tour, is a great idea because that's pretty hands-on, right? We're gonna participate, we're gonna engage lots of senses. This is a great thing to do. But I also love how the chef's atelier, when I was working in Beaune in France, she took this one level further to actually participating in going to that little French market and seeing what produce was in season, trying to identify which is the best to choose, negotiating possibly with some of those vendors before coming back and then ultimately cooking together. That's a much more participatory experience. But even on a more traditional walking or a history tour, keep in mind you can have these hands-on activities built into a larger experience. It doesn't have to be the focus of the whole tour. I loved starting out when I was doing family trips in the Loire Valley, having they call it popcorn. We were passing this ball around so the kids could get to know each other's names. Those types of icebreakers are great. We would do it with the adults and we'd often ask sort of fun or engaging question like, what was your first concert that you went to? And this got the conversation going and obviously required that participation. I remember another hands-on activity we would do when I was leading bike tours in the Pyrenees in Spain. We would get to lunch and they had the poiron, which is that sort of traditional vessel where you put red wine in it. It has this long spout and you could pour it and it has this nice arc. But the challenge that we would put to the group every time we went to lunch there was who was brave enough to try and get their arm fully extended so you can have that beautiful arc of red wine and try not to get it all over yourself. This hands-on activity always led to a lot of laughs, a lot of smiles. And that's what's cool about designing these hands-on activities into your tour, is we have to be thinking about, hey, how do we consistently create this hands-on experience? Not just one-off, or if it happens to be there, we want to do it over and over again, no matter who the guests are. The second way we can add interaction is through group challenges. Creating moments where guests engage with each other transforms a collection of individuals into a community or a team. This can be done through shared challenges, team problem solving, collaborative tasks, or group discoveries. Now, this can be the focus of the entire tour, something like an escape room, where we're going to have this shared challenge and the journey of working together, where we're reliant on each other, the ups, the downs, the celebration or failure at the end. I absolutely love escape rooms for this element, but keep in mind that we can also add these to any tour. Leading family trips in the seaside town of Essaouira in Morocco, we built a scavenger hunt that was separate for the kids, where we actually pulled them apart from the parents. And they had to go around and buy a few things from markets and find the incredibly unique things that you can find in this Moroccan town. And we met up with the parents afterwards. Leading nature walks in the Canadian Rockies, we would show people different animal tracks or signs of wildlife that we would look for along the trail. Or even something as small as on a bathroom break, give the group a question or a puzzle for them to work out or solve over the next 10 to 15 minutes. So with group challenges, we of course have to find that right balance. If a challenge is too hard or not that interesting, then it's not going to be engaging for the guests. But at the same time, the more the tension, the more challenging it is, the more memorable it might ultimately be. Take the example of Jeff, one of the members of our coaching program, where he and the team at Craftsman Ab actually give people the opportunity to make things with their own hands, do some soldering and welding to make their own copper lamp, or do leather work, or beat a knife from scratch. And this is a pretty big challenge for a lot of people, and they're put together in teams and they have to do it together. Notice here, by pushing the comfort zone, by encouraging people to take a leap, to try something new, we are going to have a more memorable experience. Third way we can add participation is through role play and immersion. This is about stepping into different perspectives or acting things out. I remember years ago that my wife and I were on a tour in the Galapagos, and Sarah was brought to the front of the group to help demonstrate the mating dance of the blue-footed booby. And she had a lot of fun doing this very silly dance, and it brought the group together. Years ago, I remember filming a tour in Lisbon, Portugal, where a young woman, Ronnie, did this incredible stop on her essentially history tour. And she had a little script where she needed a couple volunteers. And she was trying to tell the story of how Portugal had remained neutral during World War II. And so the script was one person would come up and they played Germany, essentially being the Nazis. Another person would come up and they were England. And she was ultimately Portugal. And she had this very funny sort of script of how she would play one side, one country, or the Allies versus the Axis off of each other. Now, what a creative use of this type of role play. Now, not only was this genius because it broke up the pattern of the tour where it was predominantly Ronnie communicating, not only was it much more engaging in terms of keeping the attention of that group, but think about how much more memorable that tour activity was for those people participating in the role play or their loved ones who got some great pictures. Are there small games that people could play? I remember being inspired by a stop on a Polynesian Cultural Center tour in Hawaii, where we had the opportunity to play some of the traditional children's games that were played by the kids of Tonga in Fiji. As you're thinking about adding more participation to your tour, sometimes I find it helpful to think smaller. Are there just particular elements or a particular time on your tour we might be able to make this a little bit more interactive? I remember coming up with this idea of a pretty dry logistical talk when I was picking up people for a multi-day tour, and we had about a 45-minute transfer where I'd share some of the information about how the days were going to work, important info. But what I did is I ultimately wrote it down on some slips of paper, questions related to some of what I needed to share. And I was able to seed the audience on the bus, hey, hand out, everyone grab a slip. And we could have a little bit of fun with it. I remember one of the questions being, I'm very important and I will need Wi-Fi. How does that work? So you can have a little bit of fun, but something as simple as that turns what might otherwise be a 20 or 25 minute one-way communication into something that involves some of that role playing and participation. As you're thinking about adding these elements to your tour, here are some common mistakes to avoid. Firstly, forcing participation. Challenge by choice is a great guideline where we're never putting guests on the spot. You're always providing graceful outs. And as a tour leader or host, we want to read and closely monitor body language. Secondly, be careful about poor setup or unclear instructions. We want to keep things simple for people and make sure they understand what is happening and giving them that opportunity to ask any clarifying questions. Thirdly, it has to do with that timing. If we're rushing activities or maybe they drag on too long, and that may require some extra training for your guides or hosts. Okay, let's say you've added some of these interactive elements to your tour, whether that's a hands-on activity, whether it's a group challenge, or kind of this role play. Of course, in your tour documentation, we want to very clearly lay out how you set this up, if there's any props or tools or things that you're gonna need to make that experience happen. But in addition, let's go through some of the common scenarios that might come up that are gonna derail that interactive experience. Maybe it's, hey, I don't get any volunteers, to what do we do if one person is ultimately dominating or maybe becomes inappropriate? What if it feels like it's dragging on too long? How do we deftly or quickly end that interactive experience? Setting your guides up for success in this way goes a long way to not only consistently creating a great interactive experience, but knowing what to do if something goes wrong. Now, if you found yourself nodding along and saying, yeah, of course, I know all this, go have a longer look at some of your tour's activities and experiences. I'm almost positive you can increase some of the participation and interactivity. There's a lot of lazy tour designers out there where, it's just a lot easier to maybe just share some facts or tell a story or rely on just a food stop, instead of layering in some of these ways where we can get our guests engaged. We're looking to create unforgettable experiences. We're looking to elevate your tours. We're looking to have them stay in the minds of your guests so they become super fans, so they leave those rave reviews and refer your tour to other folks. Being more memorable is about keeping guests at the heart of everything you do. Look, if you're interested in getting more resources on designing profitable tours, how to market them and sell them, book a free call with one of our coaches. We'd love to have a chat and talk about some of the ways that we can support you. Before you go here today, what are some of the ways that you drive interaction on your tours? Do you have tips or suggestions? I'd love to hear them. You can like this video, you can subscribe to the channel, you can share this with a colleague or friend, any of those things. Well, it would make my day. Thanks so much for being here. I hope you found this video useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the comments. Take care.